what's Madison's music scene like for Irish music? I suppose is there really a community, or is it kind of just a couple isolated bands playing through profile?
For Madison, the Irish immigrants came in about, like everybody else, everywhere else, came in the 1850s. And for the last half of the 19th century kept coming. And there was definitely over in the fourth and over around the Greenbush, where Meriter Hospital now is, on down through St. Mary's, Park Street, from Regent Park going south. A lot of Irish in there. And in fact, where I grew up, there were a lot of Irish around because it was between St. James and Edgewood. So there were a lot of Irish in there. But there wasn't that much Irish music that I heard growing up, and there weren't a lot of new immigrants coming in. So most of them had assimilated. So Madison does not have an Irish American community the way the Twin Cities does, the way Milwaukee has some. It has more, but certainly Chicago and the Twin Cities are much stronger that way. So the people who play music here are mostly people who learn, they're mostly students. So when we get a new influx of people, it's usually some students who are coming in, people are coming to grad school or something.
Music scene in Madison is pretty central to it? Or
I would say it's pretty important right now. I mean, it didn't used to be here. And we've had sessions here since the late 70s, I think. So started over, it's just moved around to different bars.
How do you describe the session in comparison to?
Well, it's like a conversation amongst people who, mostly it's the people who are there regularly, who are used to talking to each other musically. And then it's always great to have somebody new come in and fresh and hear what they have to say with their music. So when I was over there, I was just learning tunes by ear from different people in sessions. And certainly a whole new generation is being influenced by recording groups and touring groups who are coming out in the mid to late 70s. That was a really seminal period for a younger generation. Groups like Plankstein, the Bothy Band, and the Dan and Planet were all coming out in the late 70s, and it really turned on a whole new generation because we had bouzouki and guitars and all sorts of accompaniment and arrangements and that kind of stuff. It was kind of a blend of the folk music and the traditional music. People who were just playing traditional dance music and people who were caught up in the folk scene that was going on. So that was kind of the scene that was in Ireland when I was over there. And now I would say, I was playing with a lot of the older musicians, so it was people who harken back to the 1920s and 30s period. But now there's a lot more recording. There are a lot more young groups, and most of the people now are learning from not recordings that they've made, which is what we were all doing, but from recordings that are put out on CD or MP3 or whatever format it is. So there's always a generational difference that you can tell that the younger players have been listening to certain sets of tunes. It's the people that they've been listening to. Now, our session here does not, there's a whole fusion scene, there's a whole punk scene, there's a whole Irish rock scene. We don't really do that much with that. I know that goes on in various places in Madison. The session here is just traditional tunes.
I've always been curious about that, actually.
There are a bunch of different repertoires. There's kind of the old standard repertoire that all the session players would know through the years. There's the yeah, and especially the dance music repertoire, the traditional dance tunes. So there's kind of that repertoire. There's the repertoire of the pub ballads, of the Clancy Brothers, of sing-alongs, that whole kind of thing. Then you've got an older or a different singing tradition, often in Irish, or different ballads that are a different kind of, it's not the rebel songs, it's not the pub love songs, it's just kind of a different repertoire. Yeah, you've got different repertoires for different groups, so there really isn't one standard repertoire. I would say that probably there are somewhere between 500 and 1,000 different tunes that would be played at the session here. And what repertoire you play depends upon who's there. There's a whole different repertoire for Americans who got into it through American music.
Okay.
And then kind of dabble. So you can always tell those players because there's like a dozen tunes that they all have learned that have kind of made the rounds. And you can pick those players out right away. Whereas people who are a little more into the traditional dance music, they'll have a different repertoire. So we tend not to do many of the American standards, that American...
As a group or with the sessions?
Even at the sessions. Usually those are kind of at intermediate sessions. And this one's a little more, people are a little more seasoned here. And you're not... Yeah, at any session, it's kind of the core people who are going to kind of decide what tunes played next. So, there'll be an invitation to people who are visiting or not as strong to throw in a tune here and there. But if you don't know the repertoire,
then you can't. Okay, so it's kind of dictated by the people that show up the most.
Right.
Do you get a lot of turnover of people? Or like, are there a lot of new people that show up, or is it kind of?
There's a little turnover through the years, but it's kind of an ebb and flow. There's nothing too dramatic.
Kind of like, what do you want your audiences to take away from hearing your type of music?
Okay. At this point, I think we all are playing the music that we want to play. So if we're playing stuff that we enjoy. So if the audiences can partake of that and get into it, that's great. But we're not trying to
build some Irish.
We're not trying to meet the audience on their experiential level. So we're not playing things in a manner that would be more familiar to them. We're playing the music as we know it from Ireland. So it's more of what Irish musicians would enjoy listening to, rather than, we don't necessarily think about the audience except in maybe how we put certain kinds of sets together or certain medleys together.
Do you think that you would want your audience to understand traditional Irish music better and like Irish culture and like how Irish music sounds by playing when you play?
I think it helps if they listen more, then they can have more of an appreciation of what we do. If they don't, then if they're used to listening to Irish American, I don't know what to call it, kind of hybrid music, then it's may not be. I don't know what they hear. I mean, I kind of leave it up to them.
Have you seen a big boost in the music scene, the Irish music scene in Madison? When you think
it goes up and down. Sometimes it's.
Broca is pretty new, isn't it, in terms of the scheme of how long you've been playing on it?
Yeah, it's reasonably new. I don't know, is it 5, 7 years old? It must be 7 years old, 7 or 8 years old. But yeah, no, there's always there was a lift in the late 70s, and then there was another boost, I think. Well, the 80s had its own little jump, and then Riverdance brought in a whole bunch of folks in the mid-90s, and then Titanic brought in some folks, and then, They're just different things that happen at different times and remind people that Irish music's around.